The first thing we notice when we come into this world is how small we are, how fragile, how needy. We see that in every little baby. And that means that there is a tininess and a derivation built into our very nature. Extremely small, extremely needy. And yet, at the same time, open, as no other being on earth is. There is an aperture, an openness, a capax universi, as Thomas Aquinas says. We seem to be open to the universe. We find ourselves not at the center of a circle, occupying the entire universe, although we begin with that kind of illusion where we think everything rotates around us, or like one of two foci in an ellipse where there's some other thing vis-a-vis us, which we then absolutize, but still live within the domain of that ellipse. But the structure of human experience as we mature is clearly that of complete openness, as we occupy one focus, not in a circle or in an ellipse, but in a parabola. The parabola has one fixed point, focus, and the other point doesn't exist, it's infinity. The parabola never closes. And that's why we are programmatically open as beings, extremely small, but extremely open. And the project of a human life is that, therefore, that of ordering and structuring and making harmonious as this aperture, this openness, that it doesn't get completely out of control, that we don't get crushed by it. There was a wonderful Italian philosopher I had the privilege of knowing in Rome, Cornelio Fabro, and in one of my discussions with him, he explained that this openness of human being is actually structured in three different transcendences. He says there are three transcendences. The first is a physical transcendence that we experience already as babies and as children, as we discover that the world is far, far greater physically than our bodies. That we are small, but the world is immense and it embraces us. The world physically transcends us, goes beyond us. And then as we begin to use our minds, as the age of reason arrives, we enter into a second transcendence. We realize that our mind is capable of transcending the world. We can even imagine the world not existing, or we can imagine two worlds, and our mind, reflecting rationally, discovers that there is more. And once that is pushed to the limit, and one discovers that even our reason, pondering this world, sooner or later begins to ask questions, which are sensible, meaningful questions, but which reason cannot answer, then we discover that there is a beyond the world, a transcendence in the ultimate sense. And this transcendence is the transcendence we give the name of God to. And for those of us who are in the Christian tradition, we believe that God is actually personal and has spoken to us and has actually descended into this world. But even those who are not of this tradition understand religion usually as being an attempt to rise to that transcendence that has been perceived when reason comes to the end of the road. That would be the third transcendence, according to Fabro. And each of these transcendences brings with them a particular kind of wonder and a particular domain of human knowledge. And I'm trying to explain that in my website and here in this channel. The first wonder is the wonder at reality that we see in the face of every child, even of every infant. They can't believe it. They're looking out, not with skepticism, not with critical evaluation, but just astonishment that there is a world out there, that this first transcendence of the physical universe beyond me, in front of me, above me, below me, to my right and to my left, everywhere. That it is wonderful, which also includes being scary. It's not just a romantic, beautiful, sweet wonder. It's sometimes a very dark and difficult wonder. But we wonder at things. And the second transcendence brings a different kind of wonder. That's the wonder about. We're wondering now, where does this come from? Where is this going to? What has caused the world to be the way it is? And that's philosophical wonder. The first wonder in the first transcendence we can call poetic wonder, because we are astonished at things and we can't get enough of them. We keep looking and looking and looking and exploring. But there comes a moment in which we begin to ask questions, and that gives rise to the second transcendence and philosophical wonder, asking about causes, about principles, looking for intuitions and inferences that allow us to deepen our understanding of the world and of ourselves. And when one comes to the end of that pursuit of philosophical understanding and sees that there are questions that we ask that cannot be answered by philosophy, one moves into the third transcendence, and that is the wonder that actually is better named awe, that we see that there is something absolutely mysterious and wonderful about the very existence of the world. There's not a necessity in it, and one begins to have religious wonder in the in the third transcendence. Now, each of those transcendences also invites the constitution of a domain of knowledge. The domains of knowledge in the first transcendence, in which we explore and structure and order our physical, sensorial, and emotional and imaginative interaction with the world, the physical world, and the people in it, are what we call the humanities and the arts in the sense of the fine arts. The humanities I understand to embrace those activities we engage in to consolidate our humanity, our position in this world, over against it, open to it. And that involves situating ourselves in time, and that means some study of history, situating ourselves in space, and that means some study of geography, and also of observational astronomy, not scientific astronomy, simply taking note of the position of the sun, the moon, the planets, and the stars as they appear in our sky. And as we navigate through our lives, bearing them in mind. And then the third component of the humanities would be language, because we engage also with space and time through the spoken word, the heard word. And language is something we should be occupied with from very early on, learning grammar, expanding our vocabulary, allowing the means by which we came to know the world to become more and more familiar to us, whatever that language might be. Those three are givens. The places we live is a given. The time we live in is a given. The language we learn from our parents, from our families, is a given. But there's a fourth component in the humanities, which is literature, which is the written record of language of the past, that we also learn about as a part of our humanistic formation, because that's through the word our first opportunity to get beyond our present place and our present time, and even beyond our own language, because we can read things in translation that come from other languages. And one begins to expand one's understanding of the first transcendence, the world beyond us geographically, the world before us historically, and the languages beyond the language we speak. That's what literature does, at the beginning at least. And that already brings us to understanding the position of the arts, because we not only speak and listen and imagine, we also have bodies, we also have eyes, and the eyes want to see. The eyes want to see things more than what we are able to see here and now in this place at this time. So the visual arts expand our ability to see vicariously beyond our present time and our present place. And therefore we have painting, we have sculpture, we have architecture, we have the various minor visual arts as well. And today we have to include photography, ways in which we can see beyond our present limited place in space and moment in time. And then the performative arts, music, drama, and dance involve our bodies and our behavior and our acts and our interactions with other people. And we are able to participate vicariously in the lives of other people and get beyond just what our particular experience with other people has given to us. That's why the performative arts are so important. And today that would include also the cinema, although I point out immediately that we should enjoy the cinema with discernment and measure. It has a tendency to monopolize our artistic experience today, and especially young people who tend to just go to the movies on the weekend. Today one should judiciously choose some of the great works of the past and watch them and enjoy them, but not just consume whatever happens to come forth, because cinema is very powerful and we need to be sure it does not infringe upon our reading time and our time enjoying good paintings, good sculpture, good architecture, good dance, good drama. So all of those have to do with our experience of the world of the first transcendence. And inevitably, as we're building up this reservoir of stories, of personages, of protagonists, I was going to say, of tunes, of archetypes in our memory, becomes more and more filled with the richness of our humanity beyond our own personal humanity through the vicarious experience of the arts and the humanities. Questions begin to arise, and we see that there's a mystery in things that we cannot plumb with ease, and that our imagination and our senses and our emotions are not adequate to exploring those questions fully. And we begin to realize that just like my body, if I want to play a sport, I will have to train my body. I can't just go out and start playing a very complex sport or start playing the piano just because I want to. I need to train myself to do so. And this occurs in the world of learning as well. We find out that we need to ask our questions in an ordered way and explore the questions and find the questions that we need to ask first before we ask the ones that are more difficult. And this requires a training of the mind. And a group of arts has established itself in the history of Western thought that are not servile arts like architecture, like agriculture and culinary arts, and all the arts which have some physical object as their goal of production, but rather nor the fine arts, which are in a way an ends in themselves. They provide their own satisfaction, their own contact with the individual particular things of the world that we need to familiarize ourselves in the first transcendence. But there's a group of arts that are designed to save us from one of the consequences, one of the dangers, one of the dark side, let's say, of the arts, of the fine arts and of the humanities. And that is with all of those experiences, concrete, particular experiences through the humanities and the fine arts, we start to form opinions, and everyone has an opinion. And these opinions begin to create distress and confusion and even antagonism, and to free us from opinions and give us the opportunity to go into a more discursive, critical, rational mode and discover the truth to the extent that it is possible. We need to train ourselves, and those are called the arts that liberate, or the liberal arts. There's 3 trivial arts: grammar, logic, and rhetoric, usually in that order for a very, very good reason. And the quadrivial arts, the 4 quadrivial arts of arithmetic, geometry, music and astronomy. And these trivial and quadrivial arts are designed to help our mind, to train our minds to see things as they are, to resist the pull of the emotions or distortions of the imagination, and follow reason as far as we can in delineating the true profile of the things before us. Some of the medievals said that the trivial arts teach us how to read the book, how to read language, how to read the Bible, but also other books, and the book of written language, whereas the quadrivial arts teach us to read the book of nature, the world around us. But all of these liberal arts, and I have an article on that which I referred to in my text regarding these same things. The liberal arts do not exist for their own sake. They are freeing, and they are free, not just because only free people have the time to pursue them, that's part of it, nor just because they free us from opinion, but also because they free us to philosophize and to theologize. In other words, to move into the second transcendence. And so philosophy and theology, philosophy first, and today also the world of the sciences, which are partnered with philosophy, where reason and experience that has been controlled and carefully followed through its various stages determine the discourse we make. And here we are pursuing the causes of things and asking the whys. This doesn't mean that we leave the arts and the humanities behind us. They're always the supporting atmosphere. We go back to them again and again. We will summon their assistance to remind us of the particular things that we finally are really interested in learning about, because they're the philosophical insight that we get and the scientific insight we get throws light upon those individual things that we learned about through the humanities and the fine arts. So these are not opposed modes of knowledge, but they're complementary and they require each other. And indeed, even when we go all the way with our philosophy and our science and come to its limits and begin to recognize that there is indeed a world beyond this world, and this, you don't need religion necessarily to establish this. The great Plato made his famous second navigation, deuteropneus, which had to do with deuteroplu, the second navigation, which has to do with the first navigation is when you're trying to use the light of reason and natural experience to explain the world. Those are like the sails on your vehicle, on your boat. But there comes a time in which reason no longer will take you forward, and you have to start working hard, reasoning with great effort, because you've discovered that the only way to give genuine explanation to the existence of this world is by reference to a world apart. And that is the movement from the second to the third transcendence, and the third kind of wonder, the religious wonder, which manifests itself in various ways in the various religions of the world. In the Christian faith, which I myself represent, it is the response to certain acts, certain happenings in the history of the world in which God himself has entered into his own creation in various ways, and particularly in the incarnation. And that is a factor that you cannot ignore. It either happened or it didn't. And if you establish that the witnesses to that event are very believable, then that changes the way you look at everything else. It throws a new light upon both your philosophy and your science and your humanities and your arts. And so the religious dimension, the third dimension, and the wonder it evokes, and the domain of human activity, which is religious and then theological, insofar as we reflect upon it rationally, bringing with us the philosophy and the science and the humanities and the arts. They all must remain together, distinct but not separate. And then we would have the full understanding. All of this could be subsumed under the title of mystery. This idea of three wisdoms now, which is the precise title of my site, results from the fact that already in philosophy, we are pursuing an embracing view, understanding, intellectual grasp of reality, at least to the extent that it's possible. And it may be very, very minimal what we are able to grasp, but that minimal can be very, very important. And so the first wisdom actually arises in the second transcendence. Because in the first transcendence we have at most fables, morals of fables like Aesop's. We have sayings, wisdom sayings, apothegms, aphorisms, proverbs, but they haven't yet arrived at the discursive sophistication of philosophical argument or scientific demonstration. So we can only speak of wisdom in the full sense of the word once philosophy gets underway. That's why we call philosophy philia, the love of Sophia, wisdom. And philosophical wisdom is the first star we follow. But within the religious experience, there is a theological wisdom, because there's a new light that has been offered, a new dimension that has been added, and that produces a more embracing wisdom that embraces even the philosophical wisdom and helps us to understand why philosophical wisdom finally is insufficient and is only deluding itself if it pretends to be a complete answer to life. But even within the traditions of religion, and this is true of all the religions, but also, and particularly, I would say, of the Christian tradition, that there is within the theological wisdom a hidden gem, which we call mystical wisdom. And this is the wisdom that grows in the heart through the theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity, particularly charity, because charity opens an eye. Many other traditions talk about opening the inner eye, the third eye. You see that third eye in India sometimes, actually used as a kind of ornament on the face. But St. Paul speaks also of the oculus cordis sui, the eye of your heart, as something that needs to be opened, it's closed. And that's what happens when you grow in the actual supreme virtue of all, which is the virtue of charity. Then one begins to see things in an entirely new light that transcends philosophical wisdom and theological wisdom both, and throws its light back on the humanities and back on the arts. That's why we have wonderful sacred art. We have wonderful places to make pilgrimage to in sacred geography, wonderful times and celebrations in sacred time. The whole of these three dimensions, these three transcendences become infused with a new light through the growth in charity that hopefully is the prize being won by those who practice the Christian religion to the full. And so we have three transcendences generating three types of wonder and three domains of human activity, and then three wisdoms in the second and third transcendence. It's a little bit complicated, but I don't think it's impossible. I've written a text which will be published very soon, in which I lay all of this out in, I hope, a more digestible form. This is just to help those who have heard this for the first time. If you want to look at a book that talks about this, you can look at Jacques Maritain's Degrees of Knowledge from the early 1930s, or something written almost at the same time by the great Garrigou-Lagrange, Le Sens du Mystère et le Clair-Obscur Intellectuel, which has recently been translated into English again. It's the sense of mystery and the chiaroscuro, or the clear obscurity or the obscure clarity of the mind. And this is what wonder is. I refer again to my text on wonder. Wonder is always a mixture of knowledge with ignorance, conscious ignorance. And it's the very characteristic of human knowledge, because we are small and yet we are open to everything. And that posture of openness is the foundation of our humility, smallness that we have, but also the goal of our expansion, which is perfection in charity.